80/20 Baseball Podcast. Strike! The 80/20 Coaching Masterclass, our weekly get-together where coaches go from new to good and good to great. Mastering the fundamentals and the art of coaching.
Welcome to this week's get-together. We got part 2 of our interview with Coach David Pyrooz, who's in the trenches, doing what we're doing, coaching a youth baseball team. It's not his day job, super busy, lots of things on his plate, juggling a lot of things, a very busy life, just like all of us. And he's found a way to go out and be successful as a coach, a youth baseball coach, just a person that we want to listen to, just the type of person that we should be listening to as we grow in our role as a youth baseball coach and even parent. When we start off, David will share some advice he would go back and give himself before his first season. If he could teleport back, he's going to share with us what advice he would give himself years ago when he started coaching. Kind of that, if you could go back now, what would you do different? He's also going to talk about coaching strategies that he's trying out for the first time this season and how that's going. The third of 4 topics that he discusses is probably the best answer I've ever heard on this topic, and that is how to best utilize and get the most out of assistant coaches and parents in an attempt to make the season better and more productive and more fun for everybody involved. So he talks about his process and strategies that he uses to have a successful coaching staff and parental involvement. So you're definitely going to want to hear that. And lastly, he shares a challenge that he's currently having as a coach. This is a coach who's been doing it a half a dozen years, been in the trenches coaching for a while now, coming off a Colorado State championship for the 11-year-olds. We all have challenges we're working through as coaches and as people. So he talks about a challenge that he's currently having as a coach. Now, before we get into part 2 of the interview with Coach Pyrooz, I got the top 5 X posts of the month. What I like about the X coaching community, the coaching community on X, one, you can filter out people that are just know-it-alls or looking to disagree just to be contrarian or what have you. But you get some new ideas, you see some new things, you look to improve your game. And more importantly, it's like having a bulletin board or things posted around your desk or on the wall that are reminders. We need those reminders when we go out there, especially in those frustrating situations as a coach, those reminders of why we're doing it and what our role really is and what's the purpose of youth sports. So I love getting those constant reminders. It's almost like it imprints it chisels out, it drives home the real point of coaching and the key things that we should be taking care of as a coach to run a team that's having a lot of fun and playing a lot better baseball as they move through the season. So with that said, I took the top 5 X posts of the month. I probably go through, I don't spend a ton of time on there, but I probably see about 15 minutes to 30 minutes a day of coaching posts, baseball posts, and coaches from other sports and coaches of past that their messages are being reposted, their quotes. And I got my top 5 this month. So my guy Keith put a little intro spot. I think they call it a bumper. We'll play that and then we'll get into top 5 X coaching posts of the month.
The top 5 coaching posts of the month.
Top 5 coaching posts of the month. And leading off is a post from Tyler Osick, O-S-I-K, at Tyler Osick. And again, these are all from X. All right, here's the post. Mookie bets on visualization. Now, this is a tweet by Tyler that he sounds like he paraphrased. Mookie Betts doing an interview with the Dodgers announcers talking about visualization. Here we go. Take at bats in your mind before you go to bed. I'm going to add in here, or before the game. Visualize the pitcher you're going to face the next day and you putting your best swings on the baseball. Try to create a vivid image of what you're going to do and of you having success. You'll be shocked when you go do it the next day. How you feel a sense of deja vu. Your body just knows what to do as it's already been there before. The power of the mind is a crazy thing. So visualization, this doesn't need to be a long drawn out process. In fact, I have a pregame 2-minute visualization routine that coaches can do with their entire team right there in the dugout, right before the game. It has 6 20-second steps That will be available in the coaching plan that will launch very soon. You will know about that launch first and foremost here on the podcast. The next in our top coaching posts of the month by Jim Shapiro. Now, he posts a quote that says football, but you could just plug in baseball where it says football here. Quote, "We don't just coach football, we coach decision making, we coach choices, we coach consequences, we coach respect. We coach life on and off the field." Such a great message that never gets old because it's so easy for us and so natural for all of us, or for most of us, to go out there and focus on the scoreboard and scoring runs, etc. But it's important to keep hearing that message so we don't forget the other key priorities. Coaching post of the month, number 3. This one has to do with Mickey Mantle and bunts. This was posted by Baseball History Nut at nut_history. Quote, "Mickey Mantle had the 10th most bunt singles of all time, including 7 in World Series play and even 1 in an All-Star game." If Mickey Mantle bunts enough to get 7 base hits in World Series play, our Little Leaguers can bunt. And again, let me be very clear. This is bunting for a base hit. I'm a huge fan of bunting for a base hit, not so much the sacrifice outside of those rare situations. Coaching post of the month, number 4, comes from Coach David Klein. Coach Klein was on this podcast a while back. I think we got to get Coach Klein on again. Quote, "It only takes one bad coach to ruin a player's career. It only takes one great coach to make a kid fall in love with the game again. Be the latter." It is kind of crazy how tearing down a kid's confidence, or at least putting a big dent in their confidence, can happen so quickly and easily. But building it up and improving and growing that confidence takes time. It's not easy. It's kind of a slow, arduous process. All right. And number 5 on our top 5 coaching posts of the month, as seen on X. This is by Chris Capozzi at Chris Capozzi, Capozzi 5. And Chris posted a Coach John Savage quote and starts it off with his own message saying, "The goal has to be making the routine routine." And the quote from Coach John Savage, the UCLA baseball coach, said, quote, "You can't skip steps in the process. Development is about mastering the fundamentals before first advancing to the next level." It's a great post, a great reminder. So many coaches, so many players want to skip levels, skip the fundamentals. They want to go to the flashy, shiny objects, the flashy things. Perfect example is velocity, throwing harder, like a 12-year-old or a 10-year-old throwing a bunch of weighted balls to throw harder when they have no leg strength. Their pitching delivery is terrible, and they haven't mastered the throwing routine and long toss. Master those fundamentals before advancing to the next level. We must not chase those shiny objects. All right, that was the top 5 coaching posts of the month that I saw on X for the month of March. Some great messages there that we can use to fine tune, to dial in our paradigm so we can be more successful coaches. All right, we're going to jump in to part 2 of our interview with Coach David Pyrooz. One when you first started coaching, but if you could go back and give yourself advice, before your first season, if you could teleport back and give the young Coach Pyrooz back when you were in your 30s some advice on coaching, what would be some advice you'd give yourself?
Sure. Yeah. And this would be for anyone who's like new to coaching. I'm pretty competitive. I like to win and to do well. And a lot of us just get caught up in the heat of the moment of a game. But in the end, the kids, they don't remember the wins and the losses. Like they'll know that they won a state championship or a district championship or so on. But what they do remember is how you made them feel, whether it was feel good about themselves or feel bad about themselves. I'll never forget. It was like last year or the year before. It was one of those travel games, those treacherous early AM Saturday games. And I remember getting to the field and there was this coach that was just berating his son. The kid woke up sluggish, was having trouble getting out of the car. And the dad was telling him, like, "You need to get your act together or you're not going to be playing on this team anymore." And I just thought, gosh, it's a hard message to hear. The kid was, I think, maybe 9 or 10 years old, to hear from a coach that's your dad too. The thing to me is it's a reminder that you don't need to, if a kid makes an error, you don't need to say, do it this way, or you don't need to constantly remind them what the right way to do it. If they missed a fly ball that went off their glove, they know they already made a mistake. They're already worried about it. And, you watch those kids on the field, and if they miss a ball and they're looking right at their parent or looking right at their mom, to me, it signals that, and I've had kids do it to me too. So I'm not just pointing the finger at others. It signals like they're too tense, they're nervous, and they don't feel loose out there. They're not out there. They're going to try to improve and to do their best. So it's just a reminder that these are kids and they are going to make mistakes. And in the end, you want them to want to play more baseball, not to play less baseball because they're worried about screwing up and worried about their coach's opinion of them.
I had this thought the other day when I was driving. I go, I wonder if coaches, if we gave ourselves a pregame pep talk or a pregame talk to ourselves on the way to the game, just kind of up in our own head, saying to ourselves like a ritual, saying our team will probably make 3 errors today.
Mhm.
Like our team, my best hitter is likely going to strike out one time in the game. My pitcher, they're probably going to walk some hitters. Will likely drop a fly ball. They're 11 and 12. You just kind of reframe like the expectations at any level of baseball. There's going to be errors in every game. Very few major league games have zeros on that E column at the end of the game. Another trick I always share I've shared a couple times over the years is before the season or before a big game or even any game, just go watch some on YouTube follies, baseball follies, and watch the players we all know to be the best, the all-stars of all-stars, looking goofy, literally making the most like little league plays, boneheaded mistakes too, but also just dropping easiest fly. But like, look at Aaron Judge in the World Series, one of the greatest players maybe ever, and definitely one of the greatest of our generation. Everybody loves the guy. He's just a great dude. Heck of a baseball player, of course, one of the best in the world. He just dropped the easiest fly ball at home, not on the road where maybe the backdrop is a little different. He dropped it at home, probably the easiest fly ball he saw all season. So I really like where you're coming at with that because people think, oh, this is to make kids feel good. No, this is so they play good too. This is so they play a lot better. So not only are they looser and having more fun, but they're not afraid to make mistakes like you talked about at the beginning. And I think that translates into kids playing free and loose and athletic and aggressive. And they're not afraid. It's not about not losing. You got to play to win too. And errors and failure are part of the game. So with that said, what coaching strategies that you were trying out for the first time and how's it going?
I'm trying, a couple of things. One is I'm doing quiet warm-ups. So I'll pick one or two kids, depending on how many are there, to lead warm-ups, but to have kids as we start moving to our stretching routine and our overall warm-up routine is to have them focus on their body and their stretching. And we don't hear things, but I want them to really think about what they're doing and why they're doing it and how they're feeling when they're doing it. Some of this was just to try to say, that's the first thing we do when we get on the field. We don't pick up a baseball and throw it. We warm up first and get our bodies moving. So some of this was inspired, I think, because a lot of these kids have been playing together for 5, 6, 7 years now. And they're friends. A lot go to the same schools and they do sleepovers and movies and video games. And so it can get pretty unwieldy quickly. And so I don't know if I'd advocate for this for younger kids, like in the 5, 6, 7 age range, but at least at 10, 11, 12, like I really want them to start locking in when they get on the field and focus on baseball and to try to tune out some of the other distractions. It's not to say that you can't have fun. You'll have fun playing baseball. So that's one thing that I'm trying. It's mixed success so far. Some of the kids are really focused on it. Others just simply cannot help themselves to make a joke or to not stay focused. But as long as we're moving and trending in the right direction, I think that's a good thing. I've tried some new throwing drill as part of our throwing drill, right after our warm-ups. Got some recommendations from what I thought was pretty good advice from a pitching coach, to try to make sure that kids are moving in the right direction, have a good fundamentals. And so trying to implement some of that, like the movement into the lower body movement into the throwing drill routine. And that seemed to go pretty well just to get them more in the mindset of trying to leverage that lower half of the body. Those are two things I'd say that are the biggest differences this season compared to 2024.
And you've been doing it a while, so you're fine-tuning some of those smaller needle movers and the details. So I love those two things. That's great. You've been doing this quite a few seasons, so you're at a point where some coaches, if you've been coaching 5 or 6, 7 years, then yeah, definitely you want to start getting into those. But I like that. I had a college coach who did the same thing with the quiet, no talking during the throwing routine, the throwing program. And I found it more peaceful. And like you said, I found myself focusing more on my body and my movements more kind of internal than talking. And it just makes sense, right? Your awareness goes up when you're not having to think about talking to your friend or your buddy.
Game, you're in the outfield, you're in your ready positions, every single pitch. So it's you try to make practice as close to game-like as possible. And that to me felt more game-like.
Yeah, well, unless they're playing for the Savannah Bananas, those pitchers are talking in the middle of their. I love watching those games, those Savannah Banana games. We definitely got to get the families together and go to one of those. Now, I know the old school baseball guy, and I'm an old school baseball guy, but I still think it's fun. And the old school baseball guys, you go, hey, you don't like the Savannah Banana stuff? No, it's too goofy. It's not baseball. And I go, yeah, but you had the Harlem Globetrotter poster on your wall when you were a kid. The Harlem Globetrotters were exactly the Savannah Bananas, and everybody loved them then, and all the old school guys loved the Globetrotters. But I see those pitchers talking on the mound. But anyway, so you got some coaches that have been with you. You do a good job with a coaching staff trying to get everybody on this, trying to maximize what you can and the productivity out of your coaches. What are some things or what's something that you're doing to utilize assistant coaches and parents? I think it's really important to hear this because I see assistant coaches and parents, definitely parents, but being underutilized and head coaches or managers just overburdened and feeling like they got to do everything. What are some things or what are some advice you'd share about using or having assistant coaches and parents to help make the season better and more productive?
Yeah, I mean, that's always the hardest thing to address. A lot of coaches, they just don't like to ask for help. And I've got mixed success on that. Sometimes I'm good at it because, parents are really involved and a lot of people want to be involved. And other times, well, they're busy and, people's lives are busy and it's hard for them to be as involved. So availability is the number one thing when it comes to an assistant. You got to have people who can show up and, literally 3 to 4 days a week, typically afternoons. That means you're taking time off of work for a lot of people to be at the field at 4 p.m. When our all-star season kicks up, I mean, we're practicing all the time and it gets real busy and that's hard to manage. So availability, people have to be there to show up for the kids. Because if you don't, having one coach there, two coaches there, that's just not the way to run a practice. But even more important than availability is just picking the right people. And I'm not talking about specialists. I'm not talking about someone who is a former first baseman or a pitcher or a catcher. It'd be great to have them, especially if they're available, but it's mostly about picking like the right people. Are they good people? Can they relate to the kids? Are they cool-headed? Do they have a positive message? Are they talking to the kids or are they yelling at the kids? And for me, it's like, I know my more competitive impulses can take over from time to time. So I need someone who's, a little bit more level-headed next to me. Just a good reminder that why what we're doing and why we're doing it. Having that right balance with coaches, I think is important. And then it's making sure that you can supplement everything. So for me, a practice where kids are standing around is an unsuccessful practice. From the time we show up, whether it's 90 minutes or however long it is, there shouldn't be any downtime for a kid unless they're injured or they're really having a bad time. We're constantly spreading them out across multiple coaches. There's different, skills that they're being tested on or trained on, whether it's our catchers or our pitchers, if they're doing a bullpen, or they're bunting, or whatever it is. Some coaches just have really good skills and it's finding out what they're good at and putting it into practice. And then there's all these other parents who get involved, and whether they're throwing BP in a cage or whether they're just tossing one-hop grounders to them and working on form, getting the head behind the glove, little stuff like that. Parents will say, well, I've never played baseball. Well, you don't have to play baseball. It's not a requirement to toss a ball 6-7 feet to a kid. So getting them involved and then making sure that just because I'm coach and there's, the two assistants are coach, once those parents step on the field, they're coach too. It doesn't matter who they are, if it's Coach Mark or Coach Joe or Coach Mary, whoever it is, making sure that the kids know that once they're on the field, that's a coach, regardless if they have the formal position. And they're almost always parents. My son, who calls me coach on the field, and the assistant coach's son calls him coach on the field. We're still your dad, of course. And we could walk 30 feet over there and it'll be dad mode 100%. But while you're on the field, you're going to treat me the same way as you would, or as anybody else would. And that goes for anybody who's involved with the team and coaching. So it's trying to maximize practice. We only get so much time in the week. And, the kids have school and we want them to do their homework and to take part in their family events. But when we're on the field, we try to make sure that we could get as many reps, good quality reps as possible while we are together for practice.
What you just shared there might be the best message I've ever heard about getting the best out of the assistant coaches and the parents. I mean, you hit on 4 different things there that were all just gold nuggets. So listeners, I would recommend going back, hit that 30-second back button about 6-7 times and listen to that again. That really covered it all. I did have a question about at the beginning of the season when you're trying to get I mean, you're going to have a few coaches just volunteer, right? You got some coaches that just like, hey, I want to help. How have you been able to, how do you approach the parents or other parents to get them more involved? Anything that worked well to motivate them, to encourage them to come out and help out during practice or during a game or whatnot?
It's finding out a bit about their past sports history. Like if they have played baseball or softball, usually they want to be more involved. Or if they played different sports, maybe they're lacrosse players or football players. If you do that, competition and what sports are like. A lot of those skills could translate. Like part of our throwing drill routine, at least for our travel team, is we throw footballs. It's just part of the motion. If you could throw a tight spiral, you could also be able to pitch. And so we can have football coaches or people who've played football come out and help them with, flipping that wrist and making sure to throw a spiral. So there's a little bit of that in getting sports history. It's also just availability. Again, if parents are available, if they want to come out, there's not many times in your life you get to play sports with your kid. And my son's turning 12 and eventually by next year, he's going to outgrow a lot of what I can do. I can still throw a bullpen. I could still, catch with him, but it's a chance for you to be involved in a way that it's going to be really difficult in the future, either because you lack the skill set or because the kids lack the interest of spending as much time with their parents. And so once they hit those teenage years, it's just going to be a lot more difficult to do it. So knowing that you get to be out on the field with your kid for a couple of extra hours a week, I think once parents realize that and put that in perspective, then that can also encourage involvement. Not to guilt trip them, but it can encourage involvement.
Yeah, that's a great message too. It's just kind of like the book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. One of the main rules in there, one of the main chapters is begin with the end in mind. And sometimes we have to share the end. We have to kind of highlight it. We got to put a spotlight on the end. And I talk to parents about, we have discussion and talk about that. I go, we're going to blink and they're going to, hey, Dad, can I get the keys? Or we're going to blink and they're going to be gone. And so I use that as motivation to get my butt off the couch and go do that volleyball out in the back when maybe I'm tired or not feeling well because of that. Hey, I was thinking about assistant coaches. I've always thought of like assistant coaches as having to be like a full-time assistant coach, right? So they're at every practice and they're at every game. I was thinking, what about stepping back and looking at it maybe even differently and go, it doesn't have to be a full-time assistant coach, which you're probably going to have one of those, maybe two. My dad always had one, Coach Vasey. Coach Vasey he was there, everything. We used his batting cage in his backyard. But what about part-time assistant coaches and say, hey, I don't need you to be a full-time assistant, but what's your schedule like? And so like you said, availability was what you mentioned, one of the key things you look for. So you say, hey, here's our schedule. What can you make? Let them, I can make Thursdays, but I can't make Tuesdays, or I can be there at the game, or I can do this, or I can, whatever it is. And it could be something as simple as videotaping kids pitching in their bullpen and then sending it to you as the coach to analyze it. It could be somebody who runs the stopwatch. I'm a big stopwatch person in practices because I love kids competing against time. It's competitive. Hey, can you get a better time than you did last time? Can you get that ball around the horn in under 9 seconds, guys? Can we do that? So you could have maybe a parent that's got the stopwatch sitting there in the lawn chair and you just say, all right, stopwatch ready. And then they do the stopwatch. I know that's something as a coach you can do, but just little things like that where they could take things off the plate or plan a preseason party, team get together, or of parents that can't make it. They can't make it to anything. Say, hey, can you help organize an end of the season gathering party, pizza party? Just some thoughts on that where you can get them utilized. But when you said availability, David, I think that we have to step back. The message doesn't need to be, hey, you got to sign up to be out here every practice and every event. So if there's even a part-time, even if you can just come to half a practice, great. Then we could run these two stations when you're here. All right. What are some challenges? There's always challenges. Life is all just one big challenge. And what are some challenges that you're currently having, or what's a challenge you're currently having as a coach? And how's that going?
Yeah, I'd say one of them, it's early in the season, but travel ball started up really in January and we're practicing indoors. So it's harder to get the sort of really baseball field-like conditions in place, but we try to replicate as much as we can. We're in a cold weather state, but at least for our first couple of tournaments, we just came out cold, nervous, just lower energy. And then once you start behind, it's really hard to come back in games. So that's been one of the challenges. Kids feed off a lot of coach energy. So once the stakes are higher, especially once you start getting into those tournaments, end of season tournaments, whether it's all stars or, a really big travel tournament, they really start to pick up on their coaches' mannerisms. They really see and feed off of it, and regardless of if you're trying to look, easygoing or cool headed or whatnot. So that's been one of the challenges, is to make sure that they see you smiling and you're laughing and you're having a good time out there. Goal is to try to stop coming out, so sluggish in games, but it is tough. I don't know if it's just on a coach, their sort of behavior, but figuring out ways for kids to come out on fire, like ready to go, aggressive, competitive, ready to make outs and get hits. That's been a bit more of a challenge this year. That was a challenge last year too. That was a big one. I think another one, though, especially as the season gets going, is to maintain consistency while also having innovation. So it's not the same thing every single day, especially when you're doing everyday practices like leading up to like an all-star season. It can be tough, and you don't want it to be a grind. Like, kids learn from a grind, but you don't want it to be a grind in the sense that like they're not looking forward to showing up to practice, or they'd rather be at home having dinner with their family or watching a movie with their family. So trying to make sure that it's constantly going to be fun and that they're learning something. I'd say that's another one that can be a real challenge over the course of a season.
Keeping it fresh, but also really hammering it home the fundamentals. That's a positive about youth baseball, is that you don't practice every day like a college or even a varsity. So even by hammering home on the fundamentals, you could still go a couple practices, maybe even 3 or 4, without getting back to that same skill. It could be 2 weeks before you practice that same skill. Maybe it's relays from the outfield. Maybe it's double plays. Maybe it's some base running, steal jumps. There's some things you're going to practice more often. Of course, throwing, pitching, ground balls, hitting, of course, is something probably the biggest needle mover outside of pitching that we can work on. So that's a blessing. David, you're one of the smartest guys I know. You're in the trenches doing what we're doing, the youth coach is doing. You're super busy. I know how busy you are. You're as busy as anybody, but you still want to be a great coach for your kid and for the kids in your community. And you do take it serious and you want to do good. So I just thought you were the perfect guest to bring on this show, and then gone out and had success with it. You won the state championship last year, Colorado State Championships. Definitely more success than most coaches with the winning, but you're getting kids that still stick around and play on your team. I mean, you said you had 4 from the first season still there. That's incredible just in and of itself, just because attrition, you can't even control most of the stuff with attrition and things like that. So, David, is there anything you want to add before we go and call it a show?
I'd just add, I think you brought this up at the beginning of the episode. I mean, these are some of the most rewarding possible times that you could have with your kid on the field. There's going to be times when they're in tears. There's going to be times when they're just over the moon excited. And it's just better to be there than to not. And it's not to say that people who aren't coaches don't get those experiences, but the fact that, I'm not going to look back and regret it. I could have done all this extra stuff in work or done all these other sort of personal hobbies. But the fact that I invested this time into my kid and to coaching, those are times I'm going to look back at 10, 15, 20 years down the road and know this was, some of the most enjoyable periods of my life.
Well, I think that's a great message to end on right there. Thank you so much, Coach Pyrooz, for your time. It was great having you.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on.
All right. That concludes our interview with Coach Pyrooz. His first interview that he did back in episode 195, 196, I thought was one of the best we've had. And I think this one was even better. So hope you all enjoyed it. Thank you for being a coach. That's something to be very proud of. We should all be very proud of being coaches. It's one of the best things to hang our hats on at the end of the day, especially youth baseball coaches. You're giving back. You're trying to give back to the next generation, give back to your community, making the world better off. You should be proud of that each and every time you go out to the field. And not only that, you're coming on here. You want to be a good coach. You want to be a great coach. So always love having everybody stop by once a week for our weekly get together. Next week, I'll talk about a coach. He's a well-known college basketball coach, and he's doing something that I think we absolutely should avoid. We'll talk about how to avoid it. Then I'll share a strategy to deal with behavior issues, which we will all encounter. Those behavior issues, those behavior challenges, behavior problems, some of our players, maybe a lot of our players, will exhibit and show. I'm going to share a strategy that will be the first thing that I recommend utilizing in these situations. It's the first step in addressing behavior problems. So we'll talk about that next week. It'd be great if you could leave a quick review for the podcast podcast, share it with a friend, and thank you for being a coach. And until next week, let's keep taking care of our health so we can be at our best for our families, so we can be there for our close friends when they need us, and we can be that great coach that we want to be. All right, y'all, take care. Until next week, adios.
This has been the 80-20 Baseball Podcast, the 80-20 Baseball Masterclass. We got this. Now, let's take the field.